Okay, so this is, I believe, class 3 of in the book called To Pray as God Would Pray. And the mimer is called Hashem Sifasei Tiftach, the first mimer in this book. There's two mimers. This is the first mimer. This is from the Rebbe. So we did the introduction the last couple of classes. In this class, we're actually going to start in the mimer. I put in the chat the link. It will be easier if you have the book. I don't know if people have the book yet. It'll be easier to follow in the book because we're going to be doing a lot of footnotes. The footnotes, you have to go up and back on the screen. Do people have the book yet, or do you want me to put this in the?
Can't get it.
Sure. Oh, you printed it out. That was smart. Yeah, printing it out is smart.
Somebody put a link on how to order the book. Does anyone have the link?
It seems like it's a little bit out of print, so
I have tried
hard to find it.
Yeah, I have been trying and trying and trying to get my hands on a copy, and so far no luck.
Okay, well, I would recommend that everybody print it out so that you have a copy in front of you. It will be easier to follow that way.
So meanwhile, can you put it up on the screen again?
I can. I would prefer to not do that next time, I think, just because, well, I don't know about next time with the footnotes. This time, okay, let's see. I'm going to put it on. Okay.
Thanks.
So we're doing the first section. So, okay, just as an introduction, or, even before we bring it up on the screen, this is by way of introduction. We have to know a little bit, or we want to review, let's say, a little bit about what we're about to do, because it's a little bit of a mystical mimer. And it's going to be asking the question, this mimer is going to be talking about the phrase, Hashem should open my lips, and my mouth will say your praises. This mimer is going to be based on that question, which is, why do we have that, or how can we have that verse inserted between the end of the brachos of Shema and the beginning of Shemona Esrei? So it's a very technical question, like a halachic question, but the question is going to be couched in very mystical ideas, and of course the answer is going to be very mystical as well. So just before we even get into the, to actually reading the question is going to be asked. Then it's going to be strengthened 3 times. And then there's going to be a lot of more details that are given to strengthen the question from the mystical ideas from the Zohar, from different other places in Chassidus. And so I think it's going to behoove us to review a few basic ideas before we learn before we go into the text of the first section of the mimer. So first of all, let's just mention that there's different parts of davening, right? There's different sections of davening. And the one section of davening is the brachos of the morning blessings. There's a section of davening that's the karbanos, which we go through the daily section of what happens in the Beis Hamikdash. There's a section; those are almost pre-davening. That's very pre-davening. Then there's a section which is called Psukei de Zimra, the verses of praise of Hashem, that begins with Baruch She'amar, and that's also an introduction to the main part of davening. Then there's the Shema, the brachos of Shema, which are already part of the essential part of davening, and the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, which is also the essential part of davening. So the halacha talks about this idea that we're supposed to join Geula to Tefillah. We're supposed to join the idea of redemption to davening. And the idea of redemption is the blessing, the end blessing of the Shema, which is Ga'al Yisrael. Right before we start the Amidah, we say this bracha. And the Amidah, which is called davening. That's the meat of davening. So the main part of davening is the Amidah. We're supposed to join the two. We're supposed to join redemption to Tefillah. That's a halacha. talks about in the Gemara, and therefore we go straight from the blessing of Ga'al Yisrael into the Amidah. Now, which is also why when I teach women to daven, right? If you remember from that, right? Like it's ideal to say that blessing and then go into the Amidah. So the question is going to be, why do they insert this verse from Tehillim between the end of that blessing and the beginning of the Amidah blessing? Seems like that's not the right place to put it, especially when it's such a value to connect these two. That's what the question of the mimer is going to be. But in addition to that, the way that the Rebbe is going to be strengthening this question more and more is going to be talking about like the mystical ideas that are happening in Shema and Shemana Esrei, and the way that what the mystical ideas of connecting them, like what are we trying to accomplish by saying Shema in the mystical realms and in the physical realm? What are you trying to accomplish by saying Shemana Esrei in the mystical realm and the physical realm? And it's going to make the question even stronger. So in order to understand the question, we should just review a few ideas. First of all, we should review the idea that different tzaddikim are connected to different ones of the spheres. So, for example, David HaMelech is connected to the sphere of Malchus because he was the first king whose line continued, and from Yehuda, from the tribe of Yehuda. The first king was King Shaul, but he was not from the tribe of Yehuda, and his kingship didn't continue. David is from Yehuda, and his kingship continued, and Mashiach was going to come from him. So he's identified with the sphere of Malchus. We know that different tzaddikim were identified with different spheres. Yosef is identified with the sphere of Yesod, and that's another idea. I guess that's something that's going to be explained a little bit more. And Yehuda is identified with the sphere of Malchus as well, because Yehuda is the ancestor of David, right? Like the kingship is connected with Malchus. And we know that in general, Yesod is the end of the 6 midos, and it connects to Malchus, which is the container for all the midos as it's going to be expressed outward, as it goes down into the next level of creation, eventually into the physical world, right? Kingship, Malchus, represents this idea of taking that which is above and bringing it below, like a leader leads. So Yesod is the end of the 6 midos. Malchus is like its own identity that takes all 6. So Yesod and Malchus have to be connected. And basically what we're going to be talking about is that's why Shema and Shemana Esrei have to be connected. But like I'm just giving a little bit of a preview so to make it easier when we do it inside, in the terminology inside of the mimer. Okay. I think that's really what I want to say. Oh, and then I guess another idea that he's going to develop is so that linking Shema and Shemana Esrei is the same idea. Did I say that already? That Geula to Tefillah, right? That's the halacha. We have to link Geula to Tefillah, and Shema, the end of Shema, the blessings of the end of Shema are about Geula, redemption, the redemption from Egypt, and then obviously connecting that to the future redemption, right? Because the 3rd paragraph of Shema talks about going out of Egypt, so that's redemption. And Tefillah, which is prayer, is Shemana Esrei. Okay, I don't want to go into more detail because I think it's just going to get everybody more confused instead of less confused. But there's more detail in the mimer. Okay, we're going to do this at a kind of a slow pace, and we're going to do the footnotes, most of the footnotes. So, are there any questions before we start? I mean, it's probably a lot of questions, but we'll start. And then
I have a quick question. So we're focusing on the sfirot of Malchus and Yesod.
Not exactly, but that's going to we're focusing on the idea of davening. That's going to be brought in. That's just background information that it's important to know a little bit about in order to understand the question of the mimer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay. So it says, this is the phrase that we say before the Amidah. This is the pasuk. My God, open my lips and my mouth will recite your praise. Hashem Sifasei Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehillim. In a siddur, that's a pasuk that we say between the blessing Baruch Atah Hashem Ga'a Yisrael, which is the end of the blessings of Shema, and the beginning of the Amidah. It's written right in the siddur. You'll see it right in the siddur. It's actually a verse from Tehillim. If you look at the footnote 1. So I don't know if I can. Let's see. 1 second. Oh, so interesting. They don't put it as a footnote here. Okay, they put it as part of the text. This mimer, this is a footnote in the Sefer. This mimer was delivered on Yud Aleph Nisan 5712, the Rebbe's 50th birthday, the day when he began reciting Kapitel 51. Meaning the Rebbe said this on his birthday. You know that there's a custom from the Baal Shem Tov that everybody should say their Kapitel of Tehillim every day, which means if a person is 50, they say Psalm 51. So when the Rebbe turned 50, he started saying Psalm 51 every day, and this verse is from Psalm 51. So he delivered a discourse that explains this verse, basically. This discourse explains this verse. This is the verse that this discourse, that's why the name of this discourse is Hashem Sifasei Tiftach. Like we said, most Maimarim are based on either a verse from Torah or a verse from, or a quote from Talmud or something like that. Something in the written Torah or in the oral Torah, but in the revealed aspects of Torah, and then the Maimer just explains it. So this parak of Tehillim is what the Rebbe started saying on his 50th birthday, and he said a Maimer about it. So in Igros Kodesh Volume 9, page 238, the Rebbe writes that this Maimer is based on Maimarim of the Rebbe Maharash, published in Sefer Maimarim 5626, and Sefer Maimarim 5627, and also Sefer Maimarim 5658, where these concepts are also discussed. So this is like a side note, but the Rebbe was a 7th in the Chabad leadership, is associated with the sphere of Malchus himself. You know, the Chassidim understand that he's associated with the sphere of Malchus, which again takes everything from above and gives to below. Most of the Rebbe's Maimarim are based on previous Rebbe's Maimarim, and he adds and develops them like the sphere of Malchus does. So this one is based on other Maimarim as well. Okay, this verse expresses the request made by King David, which is a request on behalf of Knesset Yisrael. Oh, look at this. This is really great. Okay, I could just hover over the footnote and then the footnote comes up. I'm not going to have to scroll all the way down. So that's really good. Okay, so both King David. So, okay, let's just read that line again. So I interrupted it. This verse expresses the request made by King David, which is a request on behalf of Knesset Yisrael. King David is the one who wrote Tehillim. So basically anything in Tehillim could be attributed to him. This verse, Hashem, open my mouth and my lips, open my lips and my mouth will recite your praise, King David said. And he said it, which is also a request on behalf of Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish people, the congregation of Israel. Knesset Yisrael means the congregation of Israel, like Beis HaKnesses is a house of gathering, a house of congregating, a shul, the spiritual source of the souls of the Jewish people. Knesset Yisrael is considered to be another name for the source of the souls of the Jewish people. So King David is asking Hashem should open my mouth personally, and I will my lips and my mouth will recite your praise. But the Rebbe is saying when King David asks that of God, he's also asking that on behalf of the spiritual source of the souls of the Jewish people, the whole Jewish people. So look at the footnote, which is on the screen now. Both King David and Knesset Yisrael are identified with the sphere of Malchus. Remember we said the sphere of Malchus is the last of the 10 spheros. It's also the last of the 7 spheros of the Midas. It's the last of the all 10 spheros. And it's usually translated as kingship or sovereignty. It takes from above and gives to below. And a king obviously embodies this concept of sovereignty. As the king of Israel, David's responsibility was to provide for the spiritual as well as the material needs of the entire Jewish people. Hence, his prayers were also the prayers of the Jewish people as a collective entity, meaning when he prayed, he was representing the Jewish people in prayer as well. So if he said, God, open my lips and my mouth to recite your praise, and it wasn't just a personal prayer. It wasn't just a personal prayer, both because David HaMelech represented the idea of Malchus, which is a collective sphera, and because he was a king. He was an actual king, and a king represents the people. And therefore, his prayer was the prayer for everybody, on behalf of everybody, and it had, it had to do with everybody. Okay, so David's asking this, but it's not only about David. This is also the request that every Jew makes of God as he prays, meaning it's not only King David, it's not only King David on behalf of other people, it's also all of us say this. Physically, we all say this prayer. And as the footnote says, for King David's intent is mirrored in every Jew's individual prayers, meaning he says it, he represents all of us, but we also say it every day before we daven Shemona Esrei, because he taught us to say it, and we are mirroring his tefillah, right? Are we following so far? Okay, well, I only see two faces, and they say both are shaking. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, whoops. Thus, our sages ordained that it be recited before the Shemona Esrei prayers. As the Talmud states, Rabbi Yochanan says, at the outset, which means immediately prior to the Shemona Esrei, one should say, may God open my lips. Okay, this is all background information. It's like, you need to know this in order for you to understand what my question is going to be, the Rebbe says, basically. It's like a review. Here's what we do, and here's why we do it, right? We do it, we ask. David HaMelech did it, he taught us to do it. He did it on our behalf, we did it on our own behalf, and our sages ordained, because they learned from King David to do it, that we should say this before we start Shemona Esrei. It says it in the Talmud. This is an ancient custom from the Talmud. Here are the facts. But now the Rebbe has a question, and that question is going to be intensified 3 times. So I'm just to set the stage a little, okay? Explanation, however, is required. Why did our sages ordain that the verse be recited immediately before the Shemona Esrei prayers? Seemingly, they should have ordained that it be recited before one begins the entire sequence of prayers, before Shema, and before the blessings of Shema, and even before Psukei D'Zimra. Remember, we said there's different stages of davening. Why not ask God to open our mouth, our lips, and our mouth will recite his praises right as we're beginning to daven? Especially, I mean, the Rebbe doesn't say this, but Psukei D'Zimra is the praise. We are saying the praises of Hashem. Like, why are we not starting before Psukei D'Zimra? Why was the custom instituted to recite the verses specifically before the Shemona Esrei? That's our first question. Okay, where do we get that's the simple level of the question, but it's still kind of complicated. So I'm saying, do you get that? It's going to become even stronger in a minute. And we got that right. Why is it in its where it is?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. Next, how we're going to make the question even stronger. So this gets it's a teeny bit more in detail, and then the third level is going to be even more detailed. Okay. So the question is even stronger. Okay, now we're going to have a little bit of a background understanding, idea. The Talmud states, Rev Bruno once linked Geula to prayer. Geula to which, okay, here we're going to do the footnote. Geula refers to the blessed. 1 second, I have to move my window a little bit here. Okay, Geula refers to the blessing Ga'al Yisrael, he who redeemed Israel, which is the last blessing of the Shema. So there's 2 blessings we say before we say Shema, and there's 1 blessing we say after we say Shema, before we start Shemona Esrei. The Ga'al Yisrael is the blessing we say after Shema. It's at the end of Shema and the few paragraphs that come after Shema, and it leads right into the Amidah. So the Geul, when the Gemara says that Rav Bruna linked Geula to Tefillah, what the Gemara means is that he said the blessing Ga'al Yisrael, Geula refers to the blessing Ga'al Yisrael, he who redeemed Israel, as our sages emphasized, this blessing should be recited directly before the beginning of Shemona Esrei. Meaning the halacha is one is not allowed to interrupt for anything at that point. Like if a person sees thunder and lightning, they can't say the blessing. If a person has to go to the bathroom, they're not allowed to say Asher Yatzar. If the shul is already up to Kedusha, you're not allowed to answer Kedusha. You cannot say anything between the words Gal Yisrael and the beginning of Shemona Esrei. That's a halacha. It's one of the strictest. There's a few strict places in davening. From the beginning of Shema until the end of Va'ed is another strict place. There's a few strict places that there's nothing you can say in that time at all. No, nothing. This is one of those places. So Reb Bruna once linked Geula to Tefillah, and a smile did not depart from his lips the entire day. Meaning it was a good thing to do. That's a good thing to do. He should have done that. And basically, we learn to do that from him. It then questions that practice. How could the two be considered as being joined? Rabbi Yochanan says, at the outset, one should say, my God, open my lips, meaning this bracha of, this pasuk of Hashem Sifasei Tiftach, seemingly the verse, my God, open my lips, intervenes between the blessing of Gal Yisrael and Shemona Esrei. Meaning, we just said that we're supposed to insert this verse between Gal Yisrael and Shemona Esrei. So we have a problem. On the one hand, we're not allowed to make any interruption between the end of Gal Yisrael and the beginning of Shemona Esrei. At the same time, we're told we're supposed to insert this pasuk, and in fact, we do insert this pasuk. So why is that pasuk not a break between the two? In resolution, the Talmud explains that since our sages ordained that a person recite this verse between the Shemona Esrei, before the Shemona Esrei, it's considered as an extension of the Shemona Esrei. Meaning, that's the simple answer. Meaning, yes, we have this idea that we're supposed to link Geula to Tefillah. We're supposed to link the bracha Ga'al Yisrael to the beginning of Shemona Esrei. That's the halacha. We're not allowed to interrupt for anything, like we just said. And that's what the Gemara says. And the Gemara also says we're supposed to insert this pasuk, Hashem Sifasei Tiftach, Ufi Agiti L'secha. God, open my mouth and open my lips and my mouth will say your praise. So we have a problem. It's called a stira minei obey. This is a self-contradictory statement. And the answer is no. The Talmud tells us that we're supposed to do it. So that's not considered to be an interruption.
Wait, what's the contradiction? I didn't get the contradiction.
We're not allowed to make any kind of break. We're not allowed to say anything in between the bracha Gal Yisrael and the beginning of Shemona Esrei, and yet we are told we have to insert this verse.
Right, okay.
So the answer is that because the Talmud tells us that we're supposed to do it, it's considered to be part of Shemona Esrei, even though it's technically it's not part of Shemona Esrei, but we're calling it an extension of Shemona Esrei, and therefore it's not considered to be an interruption, which is the halacha. It's not considered to be an interruption. However, that's not, we have a whole mimer that's going to discuss it now, so we're not done. But like that, the answer is it's not an interruption. But this intensifies the question. Since linking Geula to prayer is such a lofty matter, meaning since linking the bracha, Gal Yisrael at the end of Shema to the beginning of the Amidah is such a lofty matter, why did the sages institute the recitation of the verse, God, open my lips, precisely before the Shemona Esrei? Thus raising a question about it being an interruption between Geula and prayer and requiring a resolution. Seemingly, they should have ordained that this verse be recited before the entire sequence of prayer. In this way, Geula would have been linked to prayer in a manner that does not raise any questions. Meaning, I was saying that's very nice. The Gemara says you have to do this, and the Gemara says you have to do this, and the answer is they say to do both, and therefore it's not considered to be an interruption. Very nice. Just tell us to say this prayer before we start Psukei de Zimra, like we said to begin with. Like and Shalom Yisrael, as they say, then everything would be perfectly fine. We wouldn't even have a question that we have to have an answer to. Just say this verse, which is a beautiful verse, before you start davening. Why are you saying it in the middle of Geula and Tefillah, which you're supposed to link together? Obviously, the deeper answer is going to be it helps the link, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. But we didn't get there yet. We have to have a whole mimer. So, but the question is, this is an interruption. And when you look at it, it's an interruption. There's a bracha. God Yisrael, you're supposed to go straight into Shemona Esrei, which is Baruch Atah. In the middle, you're saying Hashem Sifasei. And the answer is no. The sages said you're supposed to say it, so it's not considered to be an interruption. Okay, very nice. But why did they say to say it there? Say it earlier. Then we don't have a question. We don't have to have an answer. We don't have any problem. Okay? Are we okay? Yes? Thumbs up? Something? Okay.
Thumbs very up.
Thumbs very up?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I got a brewing question for later because of Mincha and that extra piece that's inserted before Shemona Esrei right there. That's for
Did you
later.
say the same pasuk before Shemona Esrei for Mincha?
But why does it say Kishem Hashem Ekra?
It doesn't say it in Chabad Siddur, so I don't know what you're referring.
I'll take a picture of it and send it to you.
Okay. Anyway, but you're not linking Geula to Tefillah and Mincha because there's no Shema in Mincha. Okay. So here, this next, but now we're going to third strengthening of the question. Now we're going to strengthen this question even more. Here's where it gets mystical. I know Joni is jumping up and down. Okay. The question is further strengthened. We're going to go kind of slow here. The question is we're going to talk about, just again, I'm going to remind you from the beginning of class, we're going to talk about how Yehuda, which is Malchus, is connected to the idea of Tefillah, and how Yosef, who is Yesod, is connected to the idea of Geula. So we're going to talk about not just the end of Shema and Shemona Esrei, now we're going to talk about Yehuda and Yosef, and this whole union between Yehuda and Yosef, and the whole union between Geula and Tefillah, like what is happening here, okay? And then because of that, we're gonna have a bigger question. Like, okay, the question is even further meaning we're gonna see how important it is to link the two. We're gonna see how even more important it becomes to link the two without any interruption, and we still have this verse that's interrupting, okay? Like we're going to make this connection to be a very strong like needing to be there according to the Zohar and Chassidus. Like it needs to be connected because that's what's happening in the spiritual realms. And if so, why do we interrupt with this verse? What's going on that this verse in the middle of everything is sitting peacefully between Gal Yisrael and the beginning of Shemona Esrei, as if it belongs there when it seems to be separating between these two and we're supposed to be connecting. And of course, the answer is going to be it is connecting, but we have a ways till we get to that, okay? Okay, so the question is further strengthened when one considers the spiritual implications of linking Geula to prayer. There's spiritual implications to everything, ladies, and this is going to be the spiritual implication of linking Geula to prayer. Remember, Geula is the end of Shema, the bracha Gal Yisrael. Tefillah is the beginning of Shemona Esrei. As it is explained in Chassidus and Kabbalah and Chassidus. I'm just checking to see which footnotes we're doing. We're not doing that one. That the link between Geula and prayer represents the union of Yosef and Yehuda. Okay? Geula, Yosef, Yehuda, prayer. You might want to make a note of that someplace if you're taking notes, because we're going to go back to that again and again. Yehuda is identified with prayer. Like, why are we saying that Yehuda is identified with prayer? Because of the state, as we talked about the statement, this time I will thankfully acknowledge God. That's the verse that I think here, that's the verse that Leah, I think there's a footnote on this, right? This phrase was recited by Yehuda's mother Leah when naming him, thus indicating that it reflects his fundamental spiritual tendencies. This is not going to be easy. Okay. Meaning, when this also teaches us something else, right? When Leah named Yehuda, she named him Yehuda, which means this time I will thankfully acknowledge God. That's what Yehuda means, thankfully acknowledging, or prayer, right? She was praying to God. She was thanking God that He gave her a fourth son. Yehuda was her fourth son, and when she had her fourth son, they knew Yaakov had 4 wives, and he was going to have 12 sons. So when she had her fourth son, she had more than her share. Basically, she had more than her allotment of sons, and so she thankfully acknowledged God that He gave her like an extra son. And we are called Yehudim. We've talked about this in other classes, right? We're called Yehudim because this concept of thankfully acknowledging, of having the quality of gratitude, is essential to the Jewish value and psyche and soul. So we're called Yehudim because that emphasizes our essence. But we also see from this that when a person is named, their name represents their essence. And so that's one of the reasons why we are so persnickety in Chabad to call people by their Hebrew names. Meaning, lots of frum people give their children English and Hebrew names. And Chabad, we really emphasize the importance of calling somebody by their Hebrew name because it represents their soul power. And by calling them their Hebrew name, we are like activating and drawing out their soul power. And even it says when the parents name their child, they have a miniature prophecy. The Arizal says it's a miniature prophecy. They're not actually naming the child, they're actually recognizing the child's essence and just calling it forth. So we want to call people by their Hebrew name. Be that as it may, Yehuda's name means I will thankfully acknowledge God, which means his name is one of prayer. And so that means his essence is prayer, which we talked about at the beginning of class, that David HaMelech, right, coming from Yehuda and representing the Jewish people, and he also represents prayer, which we're going to see soon. Okay, anyway, on a mystical plane, prayer is identified with the sphere of Malchus. Thus, King David, who was identified with the sphere of Malchus, said, Va'ani sefilasi, I am prayer. That's also a quote from Tehillim, meaning his whole life was one of prayer, because he was the sphere of Malchus, representing this idea of prayer. He and Yehuda are connected, right? David comes from Yehuda. Yehuda is his ancestor. Yehuda exemplifies this idea of prayer. David exemplifies this idea of prayer. They both represent this idea of Malchus. Malchus is the idea of prayer. Why? Malchus is a receiving vessel. Receives, meaning that's the idea of gratitude. You're receiving, right? You're humble in the face of Hashem. And at the same time, you take what Hashem gives you and you add your own like spin to it and your own energy to it, and you give it forward into the world. Right? You're receiving and giving. Like the womb receives the zygote basically, and the baby develops into a fetus and eventually into a baby, and then she gives birth. So on a mystical plane, prayer is identified with the sphere of Malchus. That's also, by the way, this is not saying in this mimer, but in other places it talks about that's why davening is a feminine mitzvah. There's different mitzvahs have different gender assignments in modern lingo. I don't know what else to say. Everybody has to daven, but davening is male and female. But davening is a feminine mitzvah because women are associated with the sphere of Malchus too, meaning everything that's connected in Malchus is connected, right? Okay, on a mystical plane, the prayer is identified with the sphere of Malchus. It is the sphere of Malchus. Okay, before we get to the next line. So we have 10 spheres, right? We reviewed the 6. We have the 10, 3 are intellectual, 6 are emotional. Then there's the last one, Malchus, which is like sort of in its own category, receives from above, gives to below. But this pattern repeats itself in the 4 worlds of creation. There's 4 worlds in the process of creation: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Atzilus being the world that's 8-cell, that's right next to God, and it's more godliness than physicality, and it doesn't feel itself to be in existence. And as the world's Bria is already starting to feel itself to be in existence, it means existence. And Yetzirah, it's already even more, it's a formation, even though it's not physical yet, but it's becoming more delineated. And then Asiya, the world of action, which eventually becomes the world of physical action, the world that we inhabit. So these are sections in creation where we're going from the essence of Hashem, where Hashem is contracting and hiding his light, contracting and hiding his light, contracting and hiding his light. And each time there's a big jump, it's called another world. There's another, it becomes another world. When there's a huge contraction and a huge hiding of God's light, it becomes the next world. And then there's 10 spheres in each of these worlds. So there's like 40 levels. But of course, each of these levels is infinite. There's so many levels within these levels, but there's 40 main levels. So there's 10 spheres and 4 worlds. So the sphere of Malchus of Atzilus, which means the last of the 10 spheres in the highest world, descends, because remember we said Malchus takes from above and gives to below. It's the connector between worlds, so that there's a link between worlds, right? Think of the womb, the connector of conception and life, meaning there's got to be a bridge somehow, like the birth canal, right? She's receiving and then she's giving birth, but it's all happening from the womb. The womb receives on one end and gives birth on the other end, right? Like the egg and however, anyway. So the sphere of Malchus of Atzilus that descends to the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. The sphere of Malchus, the lowest level of Atzilus, descends into the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Those are the 3 next worlds, as indicated by the verse. I think I want to do this. She provides for her house. This verse is in Eshes Chayil, which refers to Malchus, the woman of valor, because like we said, Malchus is connected to the concept of woman. And it also represents the Jewish people, because in our marriage to God, we are the women, God is the man. So Eshes Chayil, the woman of valor, is the wife, the physical wife, and it's also Shabbos, because Shabbos is the 7th day of the week, which is connected to Malchus, which is also the female, the queen. And also in our marriage between God and the Jewish people are considered to be the queen and God is the king. So as indicated in she provides for her household, which refers to the woman of valor, which refers to the sphere of Malchus, she provides for her household, meaning the attribute of Malchus goes from Atzilus into Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. She's providing for her household. She's going down into her household and providing for their needs. This descent is for the purpose of carrying out the task of refinement. Okay, meaning the reason why Malchus, this is going to be a long footnote, ladies, but I'm just going to give an introduction to it. The reason why Malchus goes into the physical world, similar to she provides food for her household, why the mother provides food for her children. She provides food for her children on a physical level. She's giving them physical food to eat so that they grow up healthy and able to, do what they need to do. So Malchus provides food for her household, means that Malchus is going to go down into the physical world and accomplish what it needs to accomplish there, and refine the sparks, and then bring back nourishment, basically, from the sparks to her household, so that her household, which is the world of Atzilus, can benefit from it. Now we're going to do it in the footnote, but that's like the basic idea. It's a parable and idea. We're going to do it slowly. It's a long footnote. Okay. So the Hebrew term, okay, so the verse is Vatitin Teref Lebesa. She gives nourishment for her house. The Hebrew term translated as food, teref, is numerically equivalent to 289, right? Gematria of a word is, the gematria of a word teaches us something as well. So the Hebrew term translated as food, teref, is numerically equivalent to 289. The sages of the Kabbalah explain that after the shattering of the vessels of the realm of Tohu, its lights were splintered into 288 sparks. So a little bit about the process of creation. The beginning of creation, it says there was an abundance of God's light and a paucity. How do you like that word? Paucity of vessels. Meaning the light was greater than the vessels could contain. So as the light was shown into the vessels broke. However, like imagine the oil, if you know the story, the child's story, the oil in the vessel, the oil, what's it called? It's a great book. I'll try to find it at the end of class and show it to you. It's a children's book, and it's a beautiful book. But if you can imagine if it was oil in the vessels, let's say, if the vessels broke and shattered, and you picked up the shards of the vessels, you would have a residue of oil on the inside of the vessels. The oil is going to stick to the vessels, even though most of the oil is going to spill, but there's still going to be oil stuck to the vessels, right? So too, by way of parable, the godliness shown into the vessels broke, these shards fell into the world, so to speak. I mean, it's a parable, right? The shards fell into the world everywhere, but each shard has some of that essential godliness connected to it still, because it's stuck to the inside of the shard, which is now in places that could access that and use it for inappropriate things. So these vessels were shattered into it says 288 sparks. That's the number that they were shattered to. So the sphere of Malchus descends from its place of holiness in Atzilus, this highest world, to the worlds of Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, to these three other levels of creation, to elevate these sparks, meaning we need to reclaim that oil that's connected to those shattered shards. In that way, she, Malchus, which is identified with the feminine quality of nurture, provides food for her household, meaning she nourishes the realm of Atzilus as a whole. Because Malchus goes into the world and gathers up these sparks. And then she goes back to her household, which is in Atzilus, and she brings these sparks back with her. Why is that beneficial for the world of Atzilus? For the lights of Tohu are higher and more powerful than the realm of Tikkun, the motif that governs Atzilus. Meaning, Atzilus is the beginning of creation. It's very, very high, but it's still the beginning of creation. Tohu, the lights of Tohu that shattered into the shards that spread into creation, is a higher light than what is shined into Atzilus. Because after the shattering of the vessels, I forgot to add this, but after the shattering of the vessels, there was a new system to make the world, so to speak, which was a little bit of light and in big vessels, so the vessels wouldn't break. So as soon as the world of Tikkun started to come into being, which is the world as we know it today, there's a little bit of light and lots of vessels, and very heavy, big vessels. You have to really look for the light in the vessel. So in this world of heavy vessels and little light, there's all these sparks and shards everywhere. So Malchus of Atzilus, which is the lowest level of the highest world, leaves Atzilus, so to speak, goes into the world and gathers up these sparks, and then goes back to Atzilus, her household, with these sparks. And this light that she's bringing back to Atzilus is from the world of Tohu, which is higher than what's shining into Atzilus. So she's like that mother who's going out to get food to bring back to her household and feed her children. She goes out, she works, or she gathers food, she gathers berries, she goes to the marketplace, whatever it is, she comes back and she brings food for her children. So Malchus is leaving the world of Atzilus. Malchus of Atzilus leaving, so to speak. She goes into the, because so we have to explain what that means a little bit, but just understand like just the wording of the mashal, right? Malchus leaves the world of Atzilus into the worlds of Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, gathers these sparks, goes back into the world of Atzilus, which is where she's from, and that is bringing a higher light to the world of Atzilus than what is originally shining there. Why? For the lights of Tohu are higher and more powerful than the realm of Tikkun, the motif that governs Atzilus. The elevation of the sparks of Tohu taps the energy of those lights, and in that way nourishes the realm of Atzilus. So that's the parable for what Malchus does. Now, what does that mean on a practical level? You know, there's a lot of different like ways that's carried out, but basically that's the concept of the soul coming into the world and doing mitzvahs, and then, you know, going back to heaven basically with its booty of the mitzvahs that it's doing, you know, doing mitzvahs with the physical objects in the world, and then that godliness is released from the physicality, and that's what the soul goes back to heaven with when it goes back to heaven. Yes, Debbie.
You mentioned the sparks from the world of Tohu. Is that the same as Asiya? Is that the
No.
same world?
The world of Tohu precedes Atzilus. The sparks fell into the world of Asiya. That's why it fell all the way down into the world of Asiya. That's why the physical world has these sparks of holiness in it. And that's why when we do mitzvahs with the physical world, we are releasing those captured sparks.
So Tohu is not, it's apart from the four worlds. Is it its complete godliness? Is that what that is?
It's not complete godliness. It's a step down from complete godliness, but it's godliness without too many filters. So it was more than what physical world could contain.
I thought Atzilus was that.
This is even more than that. It's more pronounced and more intense than the world of Atzilus.
So why do we
Atzilus-
say there are four worlds when Tohu would be the fifth one?
Tohu's not a world. It's not structured enough to be a world. It just shattered. The world of it shattered. It's just light.
Okay, Christina. Hope all is well with your daughter.
It can't be called a world, because the word world in Hebrew means hidden. It's hiding godliness. Tohu there's no hidden godliness there. Meaning the godliness is not contracted or concealed the way that it is in the worlds, in the four worlds. Even the world of Atzilus, which doesn't have much hidden godliness, has more hidden godliness. The godliness is more hidden than in the stage of Tohu. Tohu is like a stage. It's not really it's called a world, but it's not the same type of world as Atzilus. It's not the world of Tikkun. There's two types of worlds. There's the world of Tohu and the world of Tikkun. The world of Tohu is the world, Tohu means chaos. And Tikkun means fixing. I don't know, there's a better word in English, but fixed.
Repair?
Maybe.
So
Maybe.
Tohu is a stage. Because was Tohu once a world, and then when it shattered, it was just light?
It's called the world of Tohu. It's also called Olam HaTohu. It's also called a world because it's still part of creation as opposed to creator, but it's in a completely different state than the worlds of Tikkun.
Can Tikkun just mean order? Order.
It can. The technical term is repair, like Debbie said, but it's an ordered world. It's a structured world. That's what it is. Tohu is a chaotic, intense world. Like on a personal note, it talks about Chassidus in our own lives, right? When our emotions overtake us, we experience the concept of Tohu, whereas when our intellect leads, we experience the concept of Tikkun. When we can be talking to ourselves, and it's like when a person talks themselves off the ledge type of thing, that means that they're trying to make order out of chaos, right? Their emotions are mumbo jumbo. When somebody gets into a rage or into a panic or whatever it is, that's like Tohu. The world of emotions is like Tohu. The world of intellect is like Tikkun.
So that's the world we're in, Tikkun.
Right. I mean, basically, the whole physical world is the stage of tikkun of creation. Yes,
Which is
but
the
the
same.
lights of tohu sometimes peek through. Right. That's what the Rebbe. The whole idea of what the Rebbe says is that Mashiach is trying to take the lights of tohu. What we're trying to accomplish in this world is we're trying to access the lights of tohu and put them into the world of tikkun. That's basically our marching orders in a nutshell. Take those very high lights of Hashem and put them into an ordered world that we can access them and use them, elevate them.
So the world of Tohu is coming from a higher world
A
than
higher stage, a higher stage of.
our world, Assyria.
We're
It's coming
like
from a
at
higher
the end of
world.
those four worlds. It's like the world of Tohu, the
It's
world of these four worlds, and then the physical world that we're in. There's a spiritual world of Asiya and a physical world of Asiya.
Okay. So the spiritual world is kind of in between Asiya and Yitzhara.
No,
It's
it's
kind of in
there's Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya are all spiritual worlds. After that, there's the physical world of Asiya, which is the world that we like experience on a day-to-day basis with physical things in it.
And these broken vessels came from
Higher than these four worlds and into low, and they fell lower than these four
into
worlds.
the world.
Yeah.
And the light in them is stronger. And the idea is to pick them up and put them where? Back to the,
right, like sort of return them to their source.
which would be a spiritual world or a
Right.
place in our physical world.
No, it's a spiritual concept. Return them back to godliness. Basically, it happens whenever we do a mitzvah. Whenever we use a physical object for a mitzvah, we've taken a physical object and we connected it back to God. If we're going to get practical about it for a minute, all this like esoteric things, right? Whenever
Mhm.
we use anything in the physical world to do a mitzvah,
Mhm.
we've done this.
But there's only 288 of these sparks.
Yeah, but they're two. Yes, but
They're huge sparks.
I guess it kind of lots of pieces. Yeah, lots of. Yeah.
Each spark has a lot of pieces to it.
Yeah, we did most of it. Maybe 287 or something. I have to look up the exact number. We left Egypt. We released most of them. We've been working on the last. I forgot how many right now since for 3,000 years. So that tells
We
you.
have to do a lot of mitzvahs to be able to pick up one spark.
Yeah, something like that. I have to check this once. I have to check how many sparks, but yeah, something very, yes, exactly. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to end now, but we will pick up from here, Mr. Shem, next
Wow. Thank you very much. Wow.
week. Meantime, just keep doing those mitzvahs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. We'll review.
Thank you,
Mr. Shem. Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Haya.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Take care. Take care. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Sure.
A good week, everyone.
Good week. Have a good
Have a
week.
good week, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.